Back in 2016, No Man's Sky was the ultimate gaming disaster. Players expected an infinite universe filled with adventure, but instead, they got an infinite disappointment. No multiplayer, repetitive gameplay, missing features, it was bad. People were furious, refund requests flooded in, and the game became a meme overnight. But here's where the story flips. Instead of abandoning ship, the developers at Hello Games did the unthinkable. They fixed it. And not just with small patches. Massive updates over the years transformed No Man's Sky into the space exploration game we were originally promised. Multiplayer? Check. Base building? Check. Deep storylines? Check. Even rideable alien creatures? Fast forward to today, and No Man's Sky is a masterpiece. The game went from one of the most hated launches in history to one of the biggest comeback stories in gaming. The devs never charged for any of these updates. That's dedication. If you gave up on No Man's Sky years ago, it's time to give it another shot, because now it's out of this world. When Cyberpunk 2077 launched in December 2020, it was a mess. From bugs that made your character T-pose mid-fight to game-breaking crashes, this was not the futuristic open-world RPG players had been dreaming of. To make matters worse, it was practically unplayable on older consoles, and the reviews reflected that. It was rough. Fans were outraged, refunds were offered, and the game's reputation took a massive hit. But here's where the story takes a 180. CD Projekt Red didn't pull a Houdini and vanish. Instead, they rolled up their sleeves, issued countless patches, and reworked nearly every part of the game. They fixed bugs, polished graphics, and even added substantial updates like next-gen console upgrades and new content. By the time 2022 rolled around, Cyberpunk 2077 had transformed from a broken mess into a polished masterpiece, one of the most immersive open-world RPGs out there. Now, people are returning to Night City with a fresh perspective, and honestly, it's pretty close to what was promised back in 2018. If you wrote this game off before, it's time to jump back in. The neon lights and deep storytelling are definitely worth it now.
Wait, who was that?
Who you think?
When Prey was released in 2017, many gamers expected a sci-fi action thriller packed with alien combat and explosions. What they got, however, was a mind-bending, atmospheric, first-person survival horror that left fans scratching their heads. The game's slow burn, complex narrative, and focus on exploration left some players confused. It didn't quite have the instant appeal that many were hoping for, and because of that, it didn't get the love it deserved right away. But as time went on, Prey found its audience. People started to realize the depth of its world-building, the clever ways the shape-shifting aliens twisted the gameplay, and just how immersive the entire experience was. It wasn't about killing aliens in flashy ways, it was about survival in a claustrophobic, terrifying space station. And once players understood that, they saw the brilliance in every detail. The game's environmental storytelling and the freedom of its design became a huge selling point. By now, Prey is regarded as one of the most underrated gems in modern gaming. If you missed it, go back and experience it. When the Callisto Protocol dropped in late 2022, it was meant to be the next big thing in survival horror, a spiritual successor to Dead Space. However, it didn't quite land as expected. Despite its incredible visuals and brutal combat, the game quickly became infamous for janky controls, frustrating mechanics, and repetitive gameplay. Critics and players alike were quick to point out that the game didn't live up to its potential, and some even questioned if the devs were more focused on gore than the actual gameplay experience. But here's where the tide started to turn. As time passed, players began to appreciate the atmosphere and sheer intensity of the Callisto Protocol. Sure, the combat was clunky, but there was something deeply satisfying about that raw, visceral brutality. The story, while not groundbreaking, had its moments, and the creepy alien monstrosities were a real highlight. As updates rolled in, a few of the major bugs were ironed out, and people began to realize that despite its flaws, the game had something that kept you coming back. The Callisto Protocol isn't perfect, but it's still a solid horror experience that you need to play at least once. Death Stranding released in 2019, players were completely baffled. Hideo Kojima, the mastermind behind Metal Gear, delivered a game that felt like no other. A bizarre mix of walking simulators, package delivery, and an eerie post-apocalyptic world. With odd characters, including a baby in a jar, yes, really, and a story that made zero sense at first glance, many were quick to label it as a pretentious mess. Critics either loved it or hated it, and for a while it seemed like Death Stranding would divide gamers forever. But here's the twist. Over time, people started to get it. The game's true beauty revealed itself in its incredible world building, the mind-blowing visuals, and the deep emotional connections you form with other players, even though they're not technically in your game. The unique Strand system, which allowed you to help other players without direct interaction, became something really special. Plus, the stunning soundtrack by Ludwig Forssell just hit different. Now, Death Stranding is regarded as one of the most innovative and thought-provoking games of the generation. Mirror's Edge first launched in 2008, and it was met with mixed reviews. The game introduced players to a futuristic world and gave them the chance to run, jump, and parkour their way through stunningly designed environments. The first-person parkour mechanic was fresh and exciting, but it wasn't without its flaws. The game's combat felt clunky and out of place, and some players found the platforming a bit too frustrating. Add in a short runtime and a basic story, and many felt that Mirror's Edge was more of a cool concept than a fully realized game. But here's where things got interesting. Over the years, Mirror's Edge developed a cult following. Players came to appreciate its innovative approach to first-person movement and its minimalist aesthetic, which felt like a breath of fresh air compared to more conventional shooters. The game's fluidity when you mastered its parkour system became highly rewarding, and the world it built was like nothing else in gaming at the time. The sequel, Mirror's Edge Catalyst, refined the gameplay and story, but the original game still holds a special place in the hearts of those who loved the freedom of movement it offered. When Mafia 3 released in 2016, it was billed as a gripping historical crime drama set in 1968 New Bordeaux, a city inspired by New Orleans, and promised an intense, open-world crime experience. But the game quickly ran into issues. Despite its fantastic setting and narrative, players were greeted with repetitive missions, clunky combat, and an open world that felt empty and lacking in variety. The story, which was meant to be its shining star, was sometimes drowned out by all the repetitive gameplay and AI issues. It felt like a great idea that didn't quite get the execution it deserved. However, Mafia 3 found redemption after its initial backlash, with many players revisiting the game and appreciating the compelling story of Lincoln Clay, a man seeking revenge against the Italian mafia after they destroy his family. The music, a fantastic soundtrack featuring songs from the era, set the tone perfectly. The immersive setting and attention to detail in the world building still stood out, making New Bordeaux come to life in ways few other games did at the time. Despite the rough edges, Mafia 3 is now regarded as an underrated gem, mainly for its narrative depth and atmosphere. When Dying Light launched in 2015, it initially seemed like another zombie survival game. Nothing new under the sun. Sure, it had parkour, but could that really elevate a genre as saturated as the zombie apocalypse? Many critics were skeptical about how well the game would stand out. The combat was fun, but the world didn't seem much different from other open-world zombie games. And let's not even get started on the occasional buggy moments that made the gameplay feel a little clunky at times. But over time, Dying Light proved everyone wrong. It wasn't just a zombie game, it was a masterpiece in movement. The parkour system, which allowed you to run, jump, and climb through the city in a way that felt more fluid than most games, became the game's standout feature. The dynamic day-night cycle also took the game to the next level. Nighttime brought fear and real tension, as more dangerous, stronger zombies roamed the streets, giving a whole new meaning to survival. As the game received updates, including new content and mechanics, It transformed into something much more than its critics expected. The DLC added exciting storylines, the combat felt more refined, and the open world became something really amazing. When Days Gone was released in 2019, it was met with mixed reviews. Some praised the game's open world, its compelling story, and the immersive post-apocalyptic setting. But others found it repetitive, with uninspired missions and a formula that didn't quite live up to the hype. Critics highlighted that while the world of Days Gone was gorgeous, it often felt empty, and the gameplay didn't offer much variety. The main character, Deacon St. John, was also polarizing. Some players found his grizzled biker persona a bit too cliché. However, as the years went by, something remarkable happened. Days Gone found its audience. The game's stunning environment, filled with dense forests and decaying cities, became more appreciated for the way it made players feel truly alone in a world overrun by zombies. The dynamic weather system and the sense of survival really made it feel like you were fighting to stay alive in a harsh world. The hordes of zombies, which were originally criticized for being repetitive, actually became one of the game's biggest draws. There's something oddly satisfying about taking on a massive swarm of freakers with a carefully laid out strategy. Days Gone may have had a rough start, but after a few patches and with time, it became a cult hit, one that's now appreciated for its depth, atmosphere, and intense survival mechanics. When Alien Isolation was released in 2014, it received critical acclaim, but not without a bit of initial skepticism. Fans of the Alien franchise feared that the game might go the route of generic action, turning the iconic xenomorph into just another enemy to blast through. Instead, what players got was a masterclass in horror. Unlike most survival horror games at the time, Alien Isolation didn't just focus on cheap jump scares, it built tension with every step. The xenomorph was an unpredictable, intelligent predator that could hear your every move, making stealth and resourcefulness the keys to survival. However, despite the praise, the game faced mixed reactions early on, especially due to its pacing. Some players found the slow build-up frustrating, with long stretches of quiet exploration broken by heart-pounding moments of terror. The game's length also came under scrutiny. After all, if you're hiding from a terrifying alien for hours on end, it's easy to feel exhausted. The meticulous world-building, the stunning visuals, and the terrifying AI of the xenomorph turned this into one of the best horror games of its generation. The intense atmosphere made it feel like you were living the nightmare from Ridley Scott's classic 1979 film. It's a game that's savage and unforgiving, and while it wasn't for everyone, those who stuck with it discovered a terrifying, brilliant experience. Lords of the Fallen first hit shelves in 2014. It was touted as the next big action RPG to rival Dark Souls, but it quickly found itself in the shadow of that comparison. The game was clunky, the combat felt sluggish, and despite its attempts at a dark and gritty world, it lacked the polish that made its inspirations so beloved. Critics and players alike slammed the game for its repetitive gameplay, uninspired level design, and the kind of bugs that made players question if the game was finished at all. Lords of the Fallen quickly fell out of the spotlight, dismissed as a wannabe Souls-like that failed to deliver. But in the years since, something remarkable happened. People started to look at Lords of the Fallen with fresh eyes. Players began to appreciate the challenging combat, which, though not as tight as Dark Souls, still offered a rewarding experience. The world, while flawed, had some unique elements that made it stand out. Plus, the story had more depth than people initially gave it credit for. Lords of the Fallen may not have lived up to the hype, but it carved out a niche as a solid. When Watch Dogs launched in 2014, it was supposed to be the next big thing. Ubisoft promised an open-world hacking adventure in the streets of Chicago, with the ability to manipulate technology in every corner of the city. The hype was off the charts, until players got their hands on it and felt deceived. The game's graphics didn't match the E3 demo, and the gameplay felt repetitive, with a protagonist who was just a bit too brooding for his own good. Add in some dodgy AI and a lack of meaningful side content, and it was clear this wasn't the game we were sold. But over time, Watch Dogs found its groove. The unique hacking mechanics, which initially felt like a gimmick, turned out to be more fun than people gave it credit for. The story, while still a bit cliché, did have some interesting twists and emotional moments. Ubisoft also released several updates and expansions that added better side activities, making the world feel a little less empty. By the time the sequel, Watch Dogs 2, came around, the first game's reputation had started to improve. Now, looking back, Watch Dogs isn't perfect, but it's a fascinating glimpse into what the series would become. When Assassin's Creed Unity launched in 2014, it was a disaster, and it's safe to say it didn't get off to the best start. The game was plagued with game-breaking bugs, glitches that left characters floating in midair, and a whole slew of technical issues that led to numerous patches and patches after patches. It didn't help that Ubisoft had overhyped the game, promising a revolutionary experience with a stunningly detailed Paris to explore, and it felt like those promises were crushed under the weight of all the issues. But then, something crazy happened. Ubisoft didn't abandon it. The developers continued to work hard to iron out the bugs and polish the game into something worthy of the Assassin's Creed legacy. As the patches rolled in, the game slowly began to shine. The world of Paris, with its breathtaking historical accuracy, became a gorgeous playground. The parkour mechanics were smoother than ever, and the co-op multiplayer mode added a fun new layer of gameplay. It was clear. Unity had something special. By the time the dust settled, Unity was no longer seen as the broken mess it once was. Today, it's remembered as one of the underrated entries in the Assassin's Creed series.
Yes, you!
When Fallout 76 launched in 2018, it was a train wreck of a release. Fans had been eagerly awaiting the next chapter in the Fallout series, but what they got was a broken, glitch-filled mess. The online multiplayer was plagued with issues. Lag, crashes, and empty servers made the experience feel more like a frustrating chore than an adventure. The bugs were so widespread that players couldn't even get through a mission without something going wrong. To make matters worse, the game had no NPCs, which felt like a huge step back for a series known for its deep character interactions and storytelling. But instead of writing the game off completely, Bethesda did the unthinkable. They stuck with it. Over the years, the developers poured in updates, fixed bugs, and added new features. The most significant change? The addition of NPCs in the Wastelanders update. This gave the world some much-needed life and allowed the game to regain some of its original magic. The quests became more engaging, and the world, though still harsh, felt more alive than ever. By now, Fallout 76 has undergone a massive transformation. It may have been a flop at launch, but it's become a solid multiplayer experience with a dedicated fan base. If you gave up on it in 2018, it's time to give it another shot. When The Order 1886 released in 2015, it had all the ingredients to be a masterpiece. Steampunk aesthetics, a richly detailed world, and a unique take on historical fiction. But despite its gorgeous visuals and cinematic presentation, it was slammed for its short length, limited gameplay mechanics, and a story that felt more like a prologue than a complete game. The lack of meaningful gameplay outside of shooting sections left players wondering if they had just played a tech demo instead of a full experience. Its linear design and quick completion time led many to feel that they had been shortchanged. However, over time, opinions began to change. People started to appreciate The Order 1886 for what it did right, the atmosphere, the rich world building, and the gripping visuals that still hold up today. The game's story, while not groundbreaking, offered an interesting look into a world where ancient knights fight against supernatural threats in Victorian London. The high production values and cinematic feel made it stand out as something that pushed the boundaries of what was possible on the PS4 at the time. While The Order 1886 may have been disappointing to some at launch, its unique style and immersion have led it to be recognized as an underrated gem.
I am reloading! Rebel neutralized! Up there! Hurry! On the trolley! We need to get to Hastings! All right already! I'm pinned down!
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more content on the latest and greatest games. Don't forget to ring the bell so you never miss an update. Got a game you'd love to see in a future video? Drop your suggestions in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Stay tuned and see you next time.